Exposing the chaos behind America first. Did you know Trump's highest tariff nearly wiped out an African nation's biggest industry? It's a story that starts with a single policy decision in Washington, D.C., but its shockwaves were felt thousands of miles away, in a tiny country most Americans have never heard of. This is the story of Lesotho, a nation whose fate became entangled with the ambitions of a U.S. president, and whose people paid the price for a trade war they never started. Let's dive into how a U.S. policy shockwave sent Lesotho's economy into freefall. Imagine waking up one morning to find that the very foundation of your country's economy, an industry that employs tens of thousands, has been put at risk by a decision made on another continent. That's exactly what happened in Lesotho, a small, landlocked nation in southern Africa, when the Trump administration threatened to impose the highest tariffs in the world on its main export, clothing. Lesotho, tiny, landlocked, and famous for one big thing: making your jeans. If you've ever bought a pair of jeans from a major American retailer, there's a good chance they were stitched together in Lesotho. This country, surrounded entirely by South Africa, has become a global hub for denim and garment manufacturing. Its factories hum with the sound of sewing machines, and its people have built their livelihoods around the promise of steady work and a better future. Thanks to a sweet deal called AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, Lesotho's factories could ship clothes to the U.S. without paying tariffs. This agreement, signed in 2000, was designed to help African countries grow their economies by giving them preferential access to the massive American market. For Lesotho, AGOA was a lifeline. It transformed the country into the largest garment exporter in sub-Saharan Africa, and for nearly 2 decades it meant hope, stability, and progress. For 2 decades, this meant jobs, 50,000 of them. That's not just a number. In a country of just over 2 million people, it's a lifeline for entire communities. These jobs didn't just support workers, they put food on the table for families, sent children to school, and kept local businesses alive. The garment industry became the backbone of Lesotho's economy, accounting for nearly half of all formal employment and a significant chunk of the country's GDP. Mostly women sewing hope into every seam. For many, these jobs were more than just a paycheck. They were a path to independence, dignity, and empowerment. In a society where opportunities for women are often limited, the garment industry offered a rare chance to earn a living, support a family, and dream of a brighter future. The hum of sewing machines became the soundtrack of progress, and every finished garment was a stitch in the fabric of Lesotho's society. But in 2018, President Trump cranked up the tariff talk. As part of his America First agenda, he threatened to impose steep tariffs on imports from countries he believed were taking advantage of the U.S. The rhetoric was tough, the headlines were dramatic, and the uncertainty was immediate. For Lesotho, the threat wasn't just theoretical, it was existential. Overnight, the future of the country's biggest industry was thrown into doubt. Suddenly, Lesotho faced the threat of the highest U.S. tariff in the world, up to 50%. That's not just a number on a spreadsheet, it's a death sentence for an industry built on razor-thin margins. For every pair of jeans, every shirt, every shipment, the cost would skyrocket overnight. American brands, always looking to cut costs, started to panic. Would they keep buying from Lesotho, or would they look elsewhere? The uncertainty was paralyzing, and the fear was real. The result? Before the ink even dried, American brands bailed. Orders vanished. Investors ghosted. The phones stopped ringing and the emails stopped coming. Factories that had been bustling with activity just weeks before suddenly fell silent. The ripple effect was immediate and devastating. Suppliers couldn't pay their bills, workers were sent home, and entire communities braced for the worst. In just months, 10,000 workers, mostly moms, lost their jobs. Factory floors went silent. The impact rippled far beyond the factory gates. When a mother loses her job, her children go hungry. When a factory closes, the local market stalls lose customers. When hope disappears, so does the sense of security that holds a community together. The social fabric of Lesotho began to unravel, one lost job at a time. The government declared an emergency. Leaders scrambled to find solutions, but the options were limited. How do you replace tens of thousands of jobs overnight? How do you convince investors to stay when the future is so uncertain? The crisis exposed just how vulnerable Lesotho was to the whims of global trade, and how quickly years of progress could be undone by a single policy shift in a distant capital. Trump argued these moves would bring jobs back home. The promise was simple: By making it more expensive to import goods, American companies would be forced to hire American workers. Factories would reopen, communities would thrive, and the U.S. would regain its manufacturing might. But the reality was far more complicated. While a handful of American jobs may have been created, the cost was paid by workers in places like Lesotho, people who had no say in the matter but who bore the brunt of the fallout. But for Lesotho, it was a fast track to crisis. The loss of garment jobs triggered a domino effect throughout the economy. Local businesses that depended on factory workers saw their sales plummet. Schools struggled as parents could no longer afford fees. Hospitals faced increased demand as stress and poverty took their toll. The country's hard-won gains in health, education, and women's empowerment were suddenly at risk. Now, the country's scrambling for new partners and ways to survive, proving that in global trade, even a rumor can ruin lives. Lesotho's leaders are reaching out to Asia and Europe, hoping to find new markets for their goods. Workers are retraining, learning new skills, and searching for any opportunity to earn a living. Aid organizations are stepping in to help, but the road to recovery is long and uncertain. The lesson is clear. In a world where economies are deeply interconnected, the decisions of one leader can have consequences that ripple across continents. So next time you see a "Made in Lesotho" tag, remember, behind every shirt is a story, and sometimes one politician can unravel it all. The clothes we wear connect us to people and places we may never see, but their stories are woven into every seam. Lesotho's experience is a powerful reminder that the global economy is more fragile and more human than we often realize. And in the end, the choices we make and the leaders we choose can change lives in ways we may never imagine.